Hi everyone. Once again, we would like to thank all of you for attending our Hyper-V Optimizations and Security for Private Clouds joint webinar with Nutanix and Five9 Software. Note that this session is being recorded and we will share the video along with the slides in a couple of days after the event. Today, we have Robert Corradini, who is Nutanix Microsoft Solutions Expert, and Symon Perriman, Vice President of Business Development at Five9 Software. They are going to hold the presentation for you. With that, let's get started, and I want to pass my word to Rob. Rob?
Great. Hey, can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, you're good to go.
I think so. Awesome. Hi, my name is Robert Corradini. I'm glad to be here. I am a Microsoft Solutions expert and also a Microsoft Solutions architect at Nutanix. I'm here presenting here with Symon Perriman from Five9 Software, and we're basically going through I'm going to be talking about Hyper-V optimizations and security on private clouds. But first, we need to go through the agenda. I believe, Symon, are you going through the agenda first, or is it me?
I'll go right ahead and take care of that if you could advance to the next slide.
Sure.
So what we're going to be doing here is first taking a look at Nutanix, taking a look at kind of some of the best practices around hyperconverged infrastructure. And then Five9 will be coming in and we'll talking around some of the optimizations around security and how you can go and extend those with Azure Pack and with Datacenter.
Thank you, Symon. And let's advance this. So I'm going to give you a little rundown about Nutanix and give you an understanding of what Nutanix is about. For those of you who have never heard of Nutanix, we'll kind of give you an understanding of what we do. And if you already are familiar with Nutanix, I'm hoping to maybe teach you something a little bit new. And again, thank you again for coming out to this webinar. It's always great to do joint webinars like this with great partners like Five9 Software. And let's get started. So, a little bit of statistics around Nutanix before we kind of dive into what we do. Nutanix has been around since 2009. We were founded in 2009. Our founders actually came from some of the biggest companies out there like Google and Facebook, etc. We have over 1,300 employees plus spread out worldwide, and we currently have 2,100 customers spread over 70 countries, over 6 continents. Let me move forward here. And a little bit about some of our accolades. Gartner has published their first ever Magic Quadrant report on integrated systems. And as you can see, Gartner really has recognized Nutanix as being a very compelling vision in a fast-growing market. Comments that we directly have had from Gartner's reports are, highly innovative and scalable infrastructure that is, generally advanced compared to most rivals. Again, as you can see, it's not something that we're, being a single player in. There's a lot of major player in this market, which shows validity that, we have a solution is what is the future. Moving on. We do have a global support over worldwide. It is 24/7 by 365. Essentially, we call follow the sun support, so there's no matter, you can always get a hold of someone. We have 6 worldwide support centers. We support 70 countries. We have 50 plus spare part depots, and we have a net promoter score of over 90 plus. Now, net promoter score is one of the highest in the industries, and that's all about repeat business and customer satisfaction, etc. And again, as you can see here, we have a global support offerings. We have educational services, so you can learn about our product. And again, we have consulting services where we have highly skilled Nutanix experts to help you deploy our solutions, and we have trusted advisors, customer advocates, and we have strategic and deployment assistance, etc. So, what are we trying to do? And what is the best infrastructure? Well, the best infrastructure is the infrastructure you can't see. Many of these transformative technologies in our lives are things that we don't even think about. They just work. A lot of constraints are removed and limitations that eliminate the need for guesswork and prediction. That we're not even aware of. As technology becomes increasingly central to how our business operates, the way it stays competitive and relative to its customers, IT needs to become invisible as well. So applications and services need infrastructure, but you don't want to spend all your time dealing with that infrastructure issues. It's all in the plumbing that makes your applications run, and you want to work in a flawless way without much effort, and that's where Nutanix solution does it for you. And so let's talk about the challenges of an existing data center architecture. And specifically maybe three-tier architecture that we're going to talk about. It's inherently complex. So you have a lot of different architectures between SAN, a network switching in the middle, then you have compute on the top. Typically a lot of different vendors there, and you got to make sure they play nice. Again, it's inefficient silos there. So again, how do you know if you upgrade firmware or something on one device? How do you know you're not going to break something within your whole data center infrastructure? And then there's unpredictable scaling. And again, when you tend to buy these type of technologies like SANs, you tend to buy, a big footprint at a time, and then you're staying in these technologies much longer because you want to utilize these technologies, but then at that point you're oversubscribing those technologies on, we'll say, CPU and compute-wise. So again, these are the challenges with the existing data center architecture. Again, inherent complexity and inefficient silos and unpredictable scaling. And so you must have an infrastructure that just works, and that's what's really important, especially in this day and age of building out hundreds and hundreds of VMs for different types of workloads. You need an infrastructure that that removes constraints. Again, no more guesswork. Want to be able to scale and have predictable performance for that particular application. And you want to eliminate that guesswork. With infrastructure, eliminating constraints and these artificial IT bound borders and technology lock-ins, businesses are freed from the limits of legacy infrastructure. So, and what that really means is it turns you into an invisible infrastructure, and that's what we are all about. So, the little ingredients of an invisible infrastructure, and essentially, it really comes down to is enterprise-grade engineering, which is really, left brain, engineering with true consumer-grade design, which is really that right brain engineering, and that's really the ingredients of invisible infrastructure. So let's talk a little bit about what we do and understand what we're actually providing. The methodology is really called web scale, and web companies like Google and Facebook a long time ago started pushing the limits of these existing infrastructure systems like three-tier systems and processes in ways that traditional businesses really did not. They needed infrastructure that could support their business needs, really like rapid application development cycles or scale on demand. They want to be able to have cost containment. They tried really using existing infrastructure solutions, but really quickly realized that these legacy infrastructure really was a poor fit for their needs. So over time, these companies developed an alternative approach to IT that enabled them to get past these limitations in infrastructure. And what they've really coined this phrase is web scale IT. So some of the common traits of web scale IT are infrastructure built from commodity server hardware pulled together using intelligent software. This allows customers to start small and scale one server at a time, really truly scaling out. Secondly, the software in the system is distributed across all nodes. You don't have to have a central metadata server or name nodes. You don't see controller bottlenecks where you traditionally see in a SAN environment. You want to basically have embarrassingly parallel operations. Everything in the system needs to be, including storage functions like deduplications and metadata management and system cleanup, is distributed across all nodes. Again, another big facet of web scale design is compute and storage sit very, very close to each other. Data does not have to go back and forth between storage and compute over a network. As you understand, and as you know, data has gravity, so co-locating storage and compute eliminates that network bottlenecks and system slowdown. And then heavy automation. Heavy automation really eliminates the need for expensive, error-prone manual operations. So that's the methodology of web scale, and then we've taken that methodology of web scale and essentially have laid it on as a product here at Nutanix. And the solution being a hyperconverged solution. So So let's talk about how Nutanix solved this really infrastructure problem. So Nutanix pioneered the concept of essentially hyperconverged infrastructure, which is built based on web scale methodologies. Hyperconverged natively converges compute and storage into x86 servers with attached flash and hard drives that are deployed as a cluster. Customers can start small in a smart footprint, 3 nodes, as little as a 2U rack space, and can add compute and storage when needed. Hyperconverged radically significantly simplifies, sorry about that, how infrastructure is deployed and managed, and reduces that footprint of IT infrastructure up to 90%. So as you can see here in this diagram, what we do is we really take that infrastructure and we kind of consolidate it down and we have it really close to each other. And so, as you know, we can basically bring that down, as little as 3 or even 4 nodes into a 2U infrastructure. And then as you can see here, scaling is very easy. As you need to add more compute and storage, you add another node and you can continue to scale very easily. No large footprints or large investments. And then essentially, you can have integrated scale-out compute and storage that essentially scales with your application and your virtualization needs. So let's talk about Nutanix's, web scale infrastructure architecture a little bit more in detail. The secret to this radical change is basically our patented Nutanix's distributed file system. What you see here in this diagram is representing a typical, Nutanix cluster made up of nodes which are nothing but standard x86 commodity servers with directly attached SSD and traditional spinning hard drives. Unlike traditional infrastructure, with a finite number of storage controllers, each additional node added to this Nutanix cluster incorporates a storage controller, as you can see. And this storage controller VM ensures no bottlenecks in the infrastructure that as you scale out. In doing so, you'll completely avoid forklift upgrades, irregularities in performance as new users are added, and enhancements such as integration with public clouds. So again, this is the real basis of our infrastructure, and it's all based on our essentially our storage controller, or what we call as our controller virtual machine. So again, a typical Nutanix infrastructure has a minimum of 3 nodes, and then each node has a CVM managing its resource allocation, management, etc. And then, as you can see here, the storage from across the nodes is treated as a single storage pool. Essentially, we aggregate all that storage, and then we present it as a single storage pool to the hypervisor. In the case of Hyper-V, we present it as SMB30 storage. In the case of other hypervisors like ESX or KVM, we present that as either iSCSI, NFS, one of those two. So again, that's the basis and the secrets around our technology and how it works. And understanding that we are basically an architecture that really is for any application from any scale. Whether you have an enterprise app that's running some kind of on-prem system center application, or a SQL server that's supporting some kind of Microsoft application, or a private cloud scenario, or a Splunk or big data scenario, or even in a branched office scenario where you need a very small footprint but want some resilience there. A VDI scenario, even data protection scenario. Again, our scenario scales for any application of any scale and of any size. So again, understanding today's and tomorrow's app can live on Nutanix, and this is the typical life cycle that we have, with a hybrid application. And this is more, talking about, how customers go from on-prem to a colo or even a cloud scenario. Typical customers are interested to test workloads in an on-prem and cloud environments. Many times customers are running a dev test for high-powered apps in the cloud, and then moving these over to on-prem to 3-tier environments. Sometimes moving AWS workloads to 3-tier environment can cause sluggish performance. So with Nutanix, customers can have high performance across hybrid, on-prem, and cloud environments. With future updates, even legacy apps can run inside a container on Nutanix, which makes even more application portability. So again, you can see a typical life cycle here of how things move on and off, and again, we can support that typical life cycle of going on and off on a hybrid environment much better than traditional architecture can. So again, thank you for doing the slide presentation of this webinar. At this point, we're going to switch over to demo time, and I'm going to give you a quick demo of what it looks like, of what our interface looks like, and essentially how you manage Nutanix. So just give me one moment. This is our Prism interface. This is essentially our central management of Nutanix. Our Prism interface essentially, whether you're really managing, 3 nodes or 3 Hyper-V nodes or 100 Hyper-V nodes. Again, the management is very simple. We make it very simple to manage a cluster. As you can see in this particular cluster, I have 4 nodes and over 1 block. 1 block represents a 2U cluster. And as you can see here, it shows my total aggregate space across my nodes. And in this case, you can see it's 14 terabytes. And again, we have a free space of 9 terabytes free, and then you can see my total VMs. What's nice about our interface is that you can obviously get a lot of metrics about your particular system. Our interface is where you actually provision storage up to the hypervisor. So for example, we actually would go to an area in our interface called storage, and then once we've gone there, we go to something under something called table, and then at that point we can actually create containers. We do have the concept of how we present storage up. Even though we have a single storage pool up to the hypervisor, we have the concept of containerization. And containerization essentially allows you to add attributes, storage attributes like deduplication or compression or inline compression or inline deduplication, or even another a newer technology that we use called erasure coding. So, and essentially what we do is we present up that containerization to the hypervisor. In the case of Hyper-V, it's an SMB share, and we have the ability to essentially add those attributes. And again, you would basically do those attributes depending on the workload. Obviously, databases on a container would not be very good for deduplication, probably more in line for compression. So again, it's a per workload thing. Again, what you'll notice here is these are all my containers. One other thing you will notice is that the containerization is, the way we do containerization is thin provision. So what happens is when you present the actual storage to the hypervisor, and if you have multiple containers, by default they will actually show as all the same disk space free. It's because we thin provision in there. But we do have the concept for multi-tenant environments or service providers that need to kind of show a certain amount of capacity that you can actually go into a particular container, and actually I'll open one up here, and you could go in there and actually do a reserve capacity, and this is really important if you're doing multi-tenancy. You could do an advertised capacity up to that particular hypervisor. So again, you don't actually see the entire storage pool, you actually see only what's been reserved to you, etc. That's essentially what some of the storage is very easy to present up. Presenting storage up or a container up to a hypervisor is pretty straightforward. You type the name of the actual container or the share that you're going to present up to your SCVMM instance. In this case, I could call it test02. And if I wanted to add any attributes, I could, but in this case, I won't. I hit save. And then essentially I log into my SCVMM server, which I thought I had open, but we'll actually open up right now. Remote desktop connection. There we go. Just be 1 second, and we will be in there. 138. Essentially, by the time I get in there, it will probably have already been presented into the particular SCVM instance. And again, so let me pop open my SCVMM instance right here. And what you'll notice, apologize, it's a little sluggish today, is there are my 4 nodes that are actually what I'm looking at and representative in Prism. You'll actually notice there's the 5.9 management stuff, which actually 5.9 is going to talk about shortly. And what you'll notice is if I go to Fabric under my SCVMM, and if I go here, I don't see it yet. So like anything else in SCVMM, you definitely have to refresh. So what I'll end up doing is going to refresh the provider so we can see the actual share show up. All right, good. And if I pop back over here, oh, there it is, test02. And as you can see here, disk space available capacity is actually the same as the one I have below here, and it's because I don't have any attributes set on that. But again, that's how simple it is to present up storage from Nutanix. It's very, very simple. So that's one particular demo. Another quick use case that's really great is, data protection. We do have the ability to have, data protection between clusters, where we essentially, if you want to protect a set of VMs, you can protect them between one Nutanix cluster to another Nutanix cluster in another data center. But we also have the concept of also doing data protection in the cloud, specifically with AWS and Azure. In my particular case, I have Azure set up, and essentially you can go through, and actually I already have it set up over here. If you'll notice is I have a remote site in just a moment, and it says Azure US East. I'm actually protecting a particular container called Finance, and then I actually have a particular job set up here for that actually sets, if you look up here in my demo Azure backup, what you'll notice here is I'm actually protecting one VM, and if I go to entities, you'll see here that's the VM I'm protecting, and it's set that I have a local snapshot here, and then I also have a remote snapshot on Azure. So we do have the ability to back up to Azure and then restore from Azure if needed. Down the line, we'll eventually going to have DR abilities to Azure and even workload portability to Azure. So that concludes my demo. I'm going to quickly switch back to my deck and quickly kind of go through a little bit of our security stuff, and then that'll dovetail essentially into Symon's presentation. All right, hold on one moment. So, Nutanix has a holistic approach to security. So, understanding that is really important. Nutanix native security features essentially is we have custom security technical implementation guides, or what we call as STIGs, and Nutanix has developed their own comprehensive STIGs written in open, in the open formats that these are supported, which is our security content automation protocol. So key benefits of this, and by the way, we have a lot of customers, especially in the DoD space that are that rely on our STIGs, is that we have a threat model. Modeling so that migrates customer risk from code changes. It really gives you that benefit. There's a machine readable STIG format that accelerates customer validation security baselines with a single click report. So you can use these STIGs essentially around your assessments. And then you have enhanced feature velocity with ingrained security processes. And then again, we have a broad set of certification and evaluation compliances as a part of our Nutanix solution. Again, we have a built-in security with our ecosystem. Nutanix's holistic approach is really around, STIG hardening, SecDL, self-healing TPM, and then, end-to-end. Again, all that stuff ties in with end-to-end security stuff. Again, endpoint security with anti-malware, and that's where we tie in with our partner ecosystems like Five9, and network security. That ties in with our ecosystems of Five9 to basically provide a whole built-in security approach. Things that we provide are basically that built-in host security around, the actual technology that we have, and even data security around encryption with that data. But then you have that endpoint security and network security that's provided by Five9. Again, built-in security and our partner ecosystem. So this is really a unified approach. It doesn't take one person. We can't protect our system alone. We have to protect it with vendors and partners like Five9. So when you go with an approach like Nutanix and Five9, essentially your posture is really being one of the best you can be. You're going to improve your security and compliance with a unified solution that's designed around Hyper-V, Nutanix, and Five9. It's maximizing your performance with faster and less disruptive security solution. It increases your VM density by up to 30%. And that's really important, especially with the Five9 technology that Symon's going to talk about shortly. And you can automate that protection for virtual machines and network and storage, and hide security from your virtual machines and users with agentless protection. And that's really important these days. The days of having agents sitting on machines, are becoming days of the past. Especially with say the performance hits that some of those things that do happen to have. So. That's the end of my presentation. I want to thank everybody for joining today. My portion of the presentation, I want to hand this over to Symon, and we're going to listen to a great presentation around 5.9 and how 5.9 can protect your Hyper-V or hypervisor infrastructure. Again, I'm going to hand it over to Symon. Thank you again, and I'll be around for questions toward the end.
Thank you so much. And I'm just going to be switching over presenters. So Robert, if you could let me know when you can see my screen here.
Sure, no problem.
Well, I'll kick it off and just give a quick introduction while that's loading here. So 5.9 Software, if you haven't heard of us, we basically build solutions exclusively for Hyper-V.
I can see you. Yep.
Great, thanks. So we were first founded back in 2009 when Hyper-V first came on the market, and since then we've continued to offer only Hyper-V exclusive solutions. We've been growing pretty fast over the last year. We're headquartered in Chicago, have staff worldwide, and actually have 18 Microsoft MVPs as part of our team. So we got a pretty good global presence with a lot of good technical experts. And now we have over 80,000 Hyper-V users worldwide. Now, not all of these users are with the security product. Some of them are using our other solutions, which include 5.9 Manager and our V2V converter. Now, 5.9 Manager is kind of like a mini version of System Center. It's a centralized management console for all of your Hyper-V resources. It's easy to install, very lightweight, and it's actually designed to look like VMware's vCenter. So it's great for former VMware users that are now making the transition over to Hyper-V, and it's extremely affordable. We also have our V2V converter, and that's going to take a VMware virtual machine and convert it over to Hyper-V, and it's completely free. So if you're a VMware user looking to make a move, there's a great combination here where you can get some state-of-the-art hardware from Nutanix. We can help you with the migration process, and then you get an affordable, centralized, easy-to-use management solution as well. So certainly a lot of great stuff that we're able to provide, and even better with our partnership with Nutanix. Now, we've been expanding pretty rapidly over the past year. We've gone from 5 locations to 25 just in the last 12 months. And we've had a lot of expansion throughout Southeast Asia. And over the next couple of months, we're going to continue to grow in the Asia region, as well as start to expand into Latin America. But let's focus on the key topic here, 5.9 cloud security, and what kind of makes this unique to Hyper-V? Well, the reality is virtualization secure has to be treated differently than traditional security in a data center. And the reason why is because virtualized environments are so dynamic and constantly changing. If you kind of think about how security used to be done in the past with static servers, you might have 10 or 20 servers in your data center. And you would go to each of them and actually install some security software on them, known as an agent. And the role of this agent was to basically report back to the centralized security system, to update definitions, to run scans, and to basically protect that individual physical server. Now, this worked well when you had a static environment and things didn't change very often. But these agents are heavy. They use a lot of resources, and especially when they do disk scans, they take up quite a lot of computing power. So when you start to move to a world of virtualization, where you have virtual machines that are dynamically being created or being deployed from a library, or even being created by an end user or a tenant in a service provider environment, going through that process of having to log into each and every virtual machine and install a heavy security agent and keep that maintained really becomes impractical. So 5.9 said, look, we need to find a better way where we can provide security for virtualization, yet remove this dependency of having to go and install an agent inside each and every virtual machine. And so that's where our logic comes in and our magic. We're able to provide a fully agentless solution. And since we're designed exclusively for Hyper-V, we have the least performance impact in the industry when we're doing things such as disk scans. So this actually means that you can get better VM density and run more virtual machines on each of your hosts. So if you're a large cloud provider or a service provider, this is going to be important because being able to get better density is a key thing to help drive up your revenue and to reduce your costs. So let's take a look at how this works. What's this proprietary technology that allows us to not require agents happening anymore? Well, we essentially do this by providing security at the host level. So we're protecting the VMs before the threat even reaches it. And if you kind of think about how any type of threat is going to go and land at that virtual machine, it's going to come through the network. Now, the usual path of an internet packet is it's going to go through the external network to your Hyper-V host. from your Hyper-V host to the virtual switch, which does all of the routing, and then from the virtual switch to the virtual machine itself. But if you kind of look at this virtual switch here in the middle, this is a single point of convergence for all of the network traffic, whether that's traffic going from the outside world to a virtual machine, or even from one VM to another VM. This single point of convergence allows you to have a centralized place where you can manage, filter, and inspect all of the network traffic. And this is where the Five9 Cloud Security Agents actually sit. It takes advantage of a virtualization technology, part of the Hyper-V switch, known as extensibility. And this means that third-party software vendors such as Five9 can actually inject drivers into the Hyper-V host within the virtual networking stack. And what this means is we can actually intercept those packets as they're on the way to the virtual machine and say whether they're safe, or inspect them and say that they're dangerous and they contain a threat and block them. So we're able to actually provide protection at the host level before that threat even arrives at the virtual machine. Now the big advantage here as well, not just that we don't have to install the agents, but we're really hiding security from our end users. So maybe if you're a VDI provider or just a hoster that's got lots of public users that aren't security specialists, we want to be able to simplify security for them. Because the reality is most end users that are non-technical, they hate security. They don't want to think about it. I mean, even everybody on the call here probably gets bothered once a week when they see that notification from Windows Defender saying that your security definitions are up to date. Now what we've done here is we found a way to still have that same level of security, still do the antivirus scans, update the definitions, all the key functionality, but without the user ever seeing it. We've basically abstracted security outside of the user mode, and we're doing all of that security filtering at the network level. So this user's never going to see the security agents. They're never going to have to update them. More importantly, they can never disable them. And this is one of the biggest threats that we hear from service providers, is that they are often the source of these national attacks. Because when bad guys are trying to go and commit crimes online, they don't want to do it from their own computers. What they do is they take a stolen credit card, they go to a service provider, rent a virtual machine, disable the security on that virtual machine, and then go ahead and commit their crime. Keep in mind today that hackers really understand how virtualization works. Hackers aren't out there just creating mischief and pranks anymore. They're multi-million-dollar organized crime organizations, and they really have a great understanding of how virtualization works and the specific exploits and vulnerabilities. So if you want to avoid the most common security flaw service providers have, which is letting the bad guys in, you really want to find a solution that will abstract that security so the bad guys cannot touch it. Now, if you're a service provider as well, compliance is going to be a big issue, because compliance means that you have the recommended requirements, the hardware, the technology, the skills, and the security to meet certain types of regulations that will protect sensitive data. Now, with a traditional hosted environment, what's going to happen during a VM deployment is that you would go and have to install the security yourself. Now, and sometimes you can do this through group policy or running scripts, but in any case, with most service providers, they actually have to go and execute code within the virtual machine. And this actually violates most compliance and regulation laws that require privacy or separation between the administrator and the end user. But the big benefit of having agentless security is that the administrator never has to log into the virtual machine. So this really does enforce and guarantee that tenant privacy, helping you meet more compliance laws. Now, what we wanted to do here was not just provide traditional security around antivirus, which is what most people think about security, but really offer multiple layers, protecting every single Hyper-V vulnerability that's out there. So we developed multiple layers of security, starting with the firewall, where we could go and intercept that packet and choose whether it's allowed through or not. Next, we'll actually go and scan the packet, do a live interception, mirror it to a secondary port, and make sure that there's no viruses or threats contained within that packet. Once we write that file onto the disk, we're going to be able to scan it on the disk, make sure that the disk stays clean. And what we're going to see over time is we're going to start to build up all of this data, looking at incoming and outgoing network packets across all of our virtual machines and virtual networks. And this is going to allow us to really understand what kind of the normal operations are within a data center and if there's any anomalies. So we leverage Cisco Snort for intrusion detection, flagging things that might look a little odd in a data center. We also have our own custom heuristics where we will build a pattern of your standard operating data center traffic, and if we see anomalies or spikes from that, we'll go and alert you that something unusual is going on. And finally, we hook into other third-party analytics systems. So if you need better data insight, business intelligence, want to go and filter that unstructured data, you could go push the information out to other solutions and get that full view of your entire data center's operations. Let's take a look at this a little more closely. Now, the first layer of security is our virtual firewall. Now, as a best practice, you want to really have a universal firewall, a single set of policies that you could set that are going to be consistent for all of your hosts and all of your virtual machines. But in many hosted environments today, this is impossible simply because each virtual machine or host might have a different operating system. And this means that you need a firewall solution for basically anything that Hyper-V can support, included Windows Server, Windows Client, Linux, and Unix. Based on the most recent data from Microsoft, about 1 out of 5 Hyper-V virtual machines is running Linux or Unix. So it's quite a lot. So what we've done here is we provided a universal and global firewall. And what this means is you can go and configure the policies at the host level, and they're going to be consistent for every single virtual machine. It doesn't matter what guest operating system that virtual machine is using, because we're doing our firewall protection and filtering before that threat even arrives. So you no longer have to think about managing multiple firewall settings, rules, or programs. You can just use a single uniform solution if you're able to find an agentless solution like Five9. The second level of protection is our antivirus detection on the network. Now, what we try to do here is alert you as soon as a threat's going through the network, so that once it arrives at that virtual machine, we can immediately isolate that file or network packet to make sure that the user doesn't open it. Now, the way we do this is we're actually going to take, once we receive the packet of the virtual switch, we're going to go and mirror it. We're going to send that packet to the virtual machine, but we're also going to simultaneously filter all of the traffic in it. Now, assuming that this packet is unencrypted, we will actually try to match it live to our antivirus signatures and definitions. And if we detect that we've got a match, we can immediately alert the user and administrator so they can take corrective actions and make sure that that file is never opened or never executed. And we have the ability to hook into email alerting, PowerShell, event logs, so you can actually create your own custom scripts or policies that will have different types of remediation actions. The third level of security that we have is antivirus on the actual disk itself. Now, one of the biggest challenges that I mentioned earlier around antivirus was this overhead that happens during an antivirus scan. So for a little bit of context here, when you say, I want to go and scan my file system for viruses, what's actually happening is that you're going to go and take a look at the properties of every file on every disk, on every virtual machine. And you do a mathematical calculation on that file to see if certain parameters or characteristics match the antivirus definition, such as the hash, the length, the file name, number of characters. All these different parameters go towards this calculation. And if we see that one of the files on your system matches the same signature as one of the antivirus definitions, then we can say, hey, you have a match, you have a threat on your system. But think about the complexity of that, all of these calculations in every file. Now think about how much that gets amplified if you're running a very dense virtual machine host, or you're a service provider and you have lots of tenants running on a single server. Now what we found is most of these antivirus scans in the industry, they take about a 30% performance hit on the CPUs. So what that means is if you're running a dense environment, either your computers are going to slow down by 30%, everything's going to slow down because all these CPUs are now spending their cycles doing security calculations, or you have to run fewer virtual machines on each host, which means that there's obviously a cost to that because you need more hosts. So what Five9 has done is we have another patent-pending algorithm that gives us the fastest disk scans for Hyper-V. In fact, up to 70 times faster based on our benchmark test. And the reason why we are able to do this is, again, we specifically build and optimize solutions for Hyper-V. Unlike the competitors, we're not taking a generic solution and just saying it's going to work on Hyper-V. So the way we actually do this is using what's known as change block tracking, which is basically a computing algorithm that will track the parts of the disk which have changed or have been opened or executed since the last scan. So what we're essentially doing here is, instead of having to go and scan a 1 terabyte disk every hour, we're just seeing what's changed within the hour, which could be 1 megabyte or 100 megabytes, and we scan just those deltas, the differentials. And what we found is over time, based on standard operating, based on average virtual machine usage, changes, things like that, we are saving our customers a significant amount of time. And these scans are going so fast that the virtual machines never even notice they're happening. And sometimes the scans are happening in less than a second because there's just a few files. So this means that you don't have to worry about rebalancing your infrastructure. Your VMs aren't going to slow down, and you can maximize all of your hosts. So using a solution that has all of these performance optimizations, even though there's a cost to buy the solution, it may actually save you money in the long run because you can now run more virtual machines on your Nutanix infrastructure. Now, the fourth level is around our network intrusion detection. And I mentioned Cisco Snort a little earlier. Now, what Cisco Snort does is it's basically a library of definitions for intrusion detection. So think of it similar to a library of antivirus signatures. But what intrusion detection does is it looks for unusual types of traffic patterns that may be suspicious. The most common one that people hear about is something like a denial of service attack. That has a pattern where you have a single endpoint, maybe a web server, and is receiving lots and lots of very fast, repetitive requests from lots of endpoints, trying to take it down. Well, if you kind of think about that, that's actually a type of traffic pattern that can be defined in code. And if we notice that you have that single endpoint, and we notice that it's getting hit and overwhelmed as we're going through the logs, we're going to detect that this is an anomaly. We're going to go flag you so that you can start to isolate that, troubleshoot, or remediate the problem. And again, we take advantage of Cisco Snort. They are the leaders in the industry. And with all of our Five9 partners, we handle all the licensing for you. So you basically come to Five9, you pick which antivirus vendor, and we're going to handle all of the licensing with Bitdefender, with Kaspersky, with ThreatTrack, and with Cisco Snort for you. So you don't have to worry about any of the other licensing yourself. Our fifth level is our customized intrusion detection algorithm. So it's kind of the same concept that we had with Cisco Snort, since we're constantly logging all of these inbound and outbound network packets. And over time, we're going to build up a traffic pattern of what looks like normal operating procedure for your data center, based on the time of day, based on your servers, based on your infrastructure, based on the protocols that you use. And if we notice that something unusual has happened, like one of your endpoints is getting picked up, a new protocol is being used, other types of unusual activity, we'll go and flag it for you there. And this combination really gives you a best of both worlds approach. Using Cisco Snort, you get the intrusion detection algorithms that are globally understood for the most common and frequently found attacks. And then using this custom heuristics, you get customization for your own data center to protect you there. But last but not least, we are able to go and extend to different analytics systems. So if you want to go and take this data, which is written in the syslog format, you can go push it to on-premise analytics systems like SQL Server reporting services, or cloud-based analytics systems like Splunk, Microsoft OMS, Azure Operational Insights, or other types of solutions. Now, one of the other key benefits that we're able to provide here, since we're agentless, is the ability to have automatic and immediate protection. What this means is, as soon as a new virtual machine is deployed on a host which is protected by Five9, that virtual machine is also protected too. It gets placed in a default security group. It's running behind the firewall. All network packets to it are immediately starting to be inspected. So this means that you could guarantee that a newly deployed VM is safe, and there's no threats that can happen during the first boot, during first execution, or even while the administrator is going and trying to go and install those security agents. We give you that instant automatic protection. And so you don't have to worry about putting a dependency in end users in being able to provide their own protection. Now, we wanted to make sure that the Five9 Cloud Security solution is highly available and enterprise ready. So taking a quick look at how it works, we have our main management console, and that's going to be connected to a SQL database. In fact, we can use any type of database, but since most of our customers are Hyper-V users, they tend to have SQL already. Now, you can even use the SQL Express edition, which is completely free. So you don't have to worry about the licensing for the server. And if you have an enterprise version already, that's fully supported as well. Next, we go and connect to our system. And we can connect through our management console, PowerShell, System Center, or Azure Pack. We then add our different hosts and clusters, which are being protected. And for high availability, we could put our management server in a redundant group. So if it crashes, we can still make sure that we're alerting, tracking security policies, things like that. Our SQL database can be highly available using SQL clustering. And if you have multiple locations, we support branch office scenarios where we're able to have our security engine running in multiple data centers with our own synchronization mechanism. So when the two sites get disconnected and get rejoined, they can resynchronize their policies, logs, events, things like that. Now, as we kind of start to expand in the larger ecosystem, we found that most of our enterprise customers are using System Center. And if they want to centrally manage all of their virtualized resources, they're doing that through VMM. So Five9 does have an extension or a plugin for VMM that allows you to centrally manage all of these same security policies and settings for your virtual machines, just like you manage all of your other virtualized resources. Now, for our service providers, Microsoft has added a new technology known as Azure Pack and Azure Stack. And what that basically is it's taking the same Azure-based technologies running in the public cloud and allowing you to productize it and run it on your own hardware. And the big difference between Microsoft Azure Public Cloud and Azure Pack on-premise is that with the public cloud, you're only an end user. Microsoft IT controls the settings, they run the hardware. When you move to Azure Pack, all of this code is running on your hardware in your data center. So this is a great opportunity to open up for new customers that want the capabilities of Azure but cannot use Microsoft Azure Public Cloud for whatever reason. The biggest reason that we hear is that there's only about 20 Azure data centers worldwide in about a dozen countries, and many organizations have legal and regulatory compliance laws that say that the data cannot leave their country. And so for this reason, many service providers are now taking the same Azure technology, running it on their hardware in their country to make sure that their customers' data can stay within those geographic boundaries. So definitely take a look at Azure Pack if you're a service provider. And sometime later in 2016, Microsoft's going to be releasing its next version, which is known as Azure Stack. So with Azure Pack, which is currently available today, we do have a plugin. And once Azure Stack gets launched, we will also have a plugin for that. And what this does is it allows service providers to offer security as a service, or SECaaS. And essentially this means that we're enabling the administrators to centrally manage all of the security policies, and we're allowing tenants to also centrally manage all of their security policies across all of their virtual machines. And we'll take a look at this at a demo shortly. But essentially, we're able to provide both experiences here. The administrators, where they can configure their settings, and the tenants, where they can see and apply policies just on their own virtual machines. But what we found is most interesting about this solution for our service providers is that they can actually use this as a new revenue stream. If you kind of think about what a service provider is doing, they're almost reselling services and software to their customers and their end users. And what's not more of an important service to offer than security? Every customer is going to say, yes, I want to go and have the security package. And so what we found is pretty much every Azure Pack customer is using Five9 Cloud Security as we're the key offering on the market. And what we're able to do here is offer you better protection for your core infrastructure. We're able to offer better security for your tenants and end users. We're able to help you meet more compliance laws and regulations because we separate the administrator from the tenant. And we can now allow you to offer security as a service to your end users, which is something that you can monetize from. So most of our service providers, they'll usually charge, let's say, $2.50 per month per virtual machine. And if you want to go and add the security service, it's now $5 per month per virtual machine. So some of our largest service providers in the world that are using us estimate they're going to make over $100,000 in new revenue just by reselling Five9 Cloud Security in the first 12 months. So think about this as not just an investment to improve your security and get new customers, but also as a new stream to generate new revenue. And to the point of compliance and regulation, again, most laws now have requirements specifically for virtualized environments and cloud data centers. So it's important that if you are using virtualization, you really do get a security solution designed for virtualization. Now let's quickly switch over to the demo. We are almost out of time here, so we'll make sure that any questions that have been asked, we'll try to answer those as part of our Q&A through the interface, and then we'll continue to stay on the line for a little bit and answer questions shortly. So the first thing that you're looking at here is the main Five9 Cloud Security Console. This is what you're going to go and use to kind of set up your default configurations, create templates, create rules, and just see information over the entire environment about the health of your infrastructure. We also have that System Center Virtual Machine Manager plugin, which as you can see is fully integrated into the console and gives you a centralized way to go and manage security, turning on all different types of policies for all of your virtual machines in a centralized location. But if you are a service provider and use an Azure Pack, you probably want to be using the Azure self-service portals here. So right now, I'm logged in as an administrator, and I have the ability to go and configure all of the data center, all of the configuration settings myself. And we can see that I've gone and created a plan for Five9 Cloud Security. I could see within this that I could control how many people can access it, how it's getting advertised. And if I dive into this particular configuration here, we'll be able to configure how many users can use the firewall, intrusion detection, traffic scanning, etc. So it kind of allows us to set some organization-wide policies for who can go and consume this service. If we then drill into the main Five9 Cloud Security add-on, we can see all of the hosts which are protected, the virtual machines which are protected, with which different settings are enabled and disabled, as well as different users of them. We could create a managed template, so we have an ability to create a global security setting and publish that so that our consumers can easily apply the SQL template for their SQL servers. We see what users have been doing. We could take a look at the different tenants in my environment and how many of each resource they've consumed. And all of this is hooked into the Azure Pack billing APIs as well. So if you're using a billing service like Cloud Cruiser or Cloud Assert, you could take these different individual components and go and actually charge people individually based on their usage. And then we have email notification settings and alert settings, so we can centrally view the health of the infrastructure. Now again, all of that's on the administrator's side. But once we publish this as an end user, I can then subscribe to this service. So I've now switched roles and I'm now accessing this as a tenant, as a customer, as one of your consumers. I see that I have two virtual machines, but only one of them are protected by Five9. So if I want to go and enable all of this security without installing any types of agents, I simply select my VM, turn it on, and we've now turned on security for this virtual machine. So it's that easy. Instead of having to log in and go and configure my firewall, I just say, firewall turn on. It's on. If I want to turn on traffic scanning, turn these on and off, I can all do that from a single location. So if I'm managing 20 or 30 VMs, I could just do this all through a graphics-based interface without having to build scripts, log into these different VMs, and assume more time-consuming tasks. I could even apply a template to it. So if this newly created virtual machine is going to be a SQL server, I could select my SQL template and make sure that all those security policies are consistently applied. I could create my own templates, view my own settings, configure my own email and antivirus notifications, and then if I want to drill down into an individual virtual machine itself, I could see the firewall rules, which I've applied. We can see quite a lot here. I could see what's been filtered. I can see my intrusion detection alerts, traffic scanning alerts, all the different network connections to this VM, any types of traffic anomalies, and of course configure antivirus. And again, we do this all from a single centralized interface, making it extremely easy for end users to go and centrally manage all of their security settings. Well, with that, I just want to bring this final slide back up again that Robert had in his section and really emphasize the point here that we're working so closely with Nutanix to build a collaborative environment. We've gone through several levels of validation testing on the Nutanix platform, ensuring that our solution really does work as expected and gives you those benefits of agentless antivirus with the fastest performance and fastest disk scans in the industry. If you want to learn more, please take a screenshot. This presentation is also available for download if you select the handouts portion of the GoToWebinar interface. And with that, we'll answer a couple of questions that are still remaining. Now, for those of you that have stayed on the line, thank you for staying here. We ran a couple of minutes long. We do apologize for that. So I'm going to go and take a look at the Q&A and see what we have here. So the first question that we have here is how it's not set up. What type of manual configuration do we do here? So what we basically do with Five9 Cloud Security, along with our 3 different antivirus options and Cisco Snort for intrusion detection, we have a single centralized installer for all of these components. So you don't need to go and install these agents separately or update these signatures separately. We handle all of this process automatically for you. And again, we also include all of the licenses as part of the package. So you come to us, you pick Bitdefender, Kaspersky, or ThreatTrack, and you get Cisco Snort for Business, and we handle all of the licensing and the royalty on the back end. I do have a question here for Robert. So, Robert, does Nutanix support Windows Server 2016 yet? Of course, Windows Server 2016 is in technical preview, but even with the current technical preview version, what is your level of support right now?
So no, currently no, we do not support it. We are currently testing in our labs with 2016 TP4. In fact, some of our engineers have it up and running in our labs. But again, it's not GA yet, so we are in technical preview, and so until we get GA, we're not in the position to support it until we have all those bits. You know, you get where I'm going. And typically, once it becomes GA, we will support it in short order.
That's great. So I'll take another question that we have for Five9 here, and it's saying in the next version of Windows Server, there's a whole concept known as shielded virtual machines. How is this going to work with Five9? So to set a little bit of background here, Windows Server 2016 is adding this new virtualization feature known as shielded VMs. And what's basically happening here is that Hyper-V is now able to virtualize their TPM, which is it's a hardware-based trusted controller module. And that is basically able to take a key value pair between the virtual machine and a particular hoster and only allow that virtual machine to operate with that hoster if those pair match. So think of it as almost like this massively random number assigned to VMs that's embedded, fully encrypted, and only if that hoster has that same matching key will he be able to use the VM. Otherwise, it's fully encrypted, locked down with BitLocker, things like that. So this is going to be a great technology for service providers, and we expect there to be, pretty significant adoption. The biggest challenge Five9 sees, though, is the entire environment to configure the shielded VMs is pretty complicated. There's a lot of complexity there. However, we are pretty committed to supporting this scenario, and we are actively working with the Hyper-V engineering team on making sure that we can do this. To be transparent, it's looking like we will not have the ability to do the live scan on a shielded VM, but we will still be able to apply the same security policies, where we can be agentless, we can intercept the packets before they arrive at the VM, and assuming that we have the BitLocker key, we would then also be able to scan the disk. We'll be able to do the network traffic filtering, the intrusion detection, the custom heuristics on the inbound and outbound traffic. So there are a couple holes that shielded VMs will block, which is great for the customers, but we are absolutely working around those to try to still provide the best solution for service providers. Great question. The next one that I have here is kind of a combination question, but I'll let Robert go take this one first. And it's saying, do Five9 and Nutanix work together without issues when it comes to Hyper-V network virtualization? So Robert, why don't you kind of just address Nutanix support policy with Hyper-V network virtualization, then I'll touch on that with us.
Sure. So with Hyper-V support virtualization, we fully support Hyper-V in networking. We don't directly integrate in the per se of an API sense with Hyper-V networking like Five9 does, because they essentially, and I'll let Simon kind of get into that, hook into the Hyper-V extendable switch. But the Hyper-V networking does play very nice. But we do have to do specific scripts to basically make our nodes or hosts join a Hyper-V network. We do also have some specific criteria around networking with Hyper-V, specifically around how our nodes communicate on our essentially our CVMs, our controller virtual machines. But again, in a general sense, there's really not a lot of complexity with Hyper-V networking and Nutanix. But in a future release, down the line, we're going to have a lot more integration into the networking stack to give you a little bit more visibility around maybe like a single pane of glass. So when you're looking at Nutanix, not just looking at your storage and compute and memory, but looking at everything within the stack, that will eventually come. Hopefully that answers that question. So.
Great. And to touch on that from Five9's perspective, we're fully supported, fully integrated, since we are a kind of part of that Hyper-V networking stack. So much so, we're actually a kernel level driver. And so what that means is we actually sit in kind of the core networking stack. So this means that users cannot log into a system, cannot disable it, can't interact with it anyway. So we do full supporting, full test with all of the different network virtualization components, NVGRE, NVGRE gateways, IPv4, IPv6. So all of those different standards fully tested, fully supported by Five9. Got some great questions coming through. Please keep sending them along. So the next one, yeah, go ahead.
And actually, one thing I'd like to mention is, like, as Five9 has mentioned, is they are validated on Nutanix, and they went through processes where they basically have validated their entire Five9 security platform on Hyper-V, and protecting VMs and essentially exercising those behaviors. Just to kind of give you a little quick update, is Nutanix has a Nutanix Ready program, and that essentially provides validation where we validate partners running tests on our platform. So just a little tidbit on that. Sorry about that, Simon. Go ahead.
Great, thanks. We'll move on to the next question that we have here, and that asks whether Five9 is able to take those logs from Snort and send them to another centralized SIEM console. And so a SIEM console, just for a little bit of context, is basically a security console that can take all different logs, all different events from different places and centrally view them. And the answer to that is yes, we absolutely can. One of the things that was important to us was interoperability. So with all of the logs that we actually write to and create, we use a standard login format, which is known as syslog. And so since we support syslog, we are fully integrated with any other system that will support that format. So that includes various SIEM systems. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, that allows us to hook it to other security analytics like Splunk, Microsoft OMS, Azure Operational Insights, etc. Next question that I have here is going to be back to you here. I think this is the last question that we have coming in here. And Robert, this was based on this Gartner slide that you had. So Gartner actually called the solutions that they were evaluating integrated systems, whereas you guys call them hyperconverged systems. Is there really any difference between that terminology, or are those just kind of interchangeable?
Yeah, there's a lot of terminologies. Integrated systems, they are interchangeable. There are some terminologies that are not interchangeable. For example, you'll hear one called converged systems versus hyperconverged systems.
What's the difference?
And in our eyes, we feel that converged systems is really the V1 portion of this technology, where essentially when it was first coming out, this is more of a V1 portion, converged was. I don't want to name names on who we consider converged systems on this particular webinar, but there are a number of large players, even in that Gartner deck, that we consider converged systems versus hyperconverged. And hyperconverged really, in our opinion, is really kind of taking all those aspects of that web scale methodology, and not just portion of the web scale methodology. Converged in some cases with some vendors means some of those things, but not using potentially maybe a proprietary accelerator card, which is not using commodity hardware. So in my opinion, would not be considered converged. I mean, hyperconverged versus as a converged system. So I know it's a little confusing. It's just confusing of all the terminology we have around IaaS and PaaS and and platform as a service and identity as a service. But hopefully that clarifies what the differences are. There are a lot of those terms are interchangeable, but we tend to use terms like web scale, hyperconverged, and integrated.
Great, thanks, Robert. Well, that's all the questions that have come through. If you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to contact Robert or myself, Simon@five9.com, @Symon Perriman on Twitter, or Robert.Corradini @Nutanix.com, or tweet him @NetWatch. Well, with that, we're going to wrap up the presentation. Thank you for joining us. We certainly hope you learned some key benefits around moving to a hyper-converged system, as well as the benefits of using an agentless solution designed for Hyper-V. We'll be sending out links to the recording and the video shortly after the event, and make sure that you come back to both companies' websites and check out our webinar page for future events hosted by Five9 and Nutanix. With that, we wish you a great day. Thank you, and goodbye.
Have a good day, everyone.